In 2008, inside a quiet hospital room in Los Angeles, Michael Jackson did something that no one, not even those closest to him, expected. He stepped toward his father, Joseph Jackson, the man who had shaped his childhood, his career, his pain, and his destiny, and wrapped him in one final embrace. What Michael whispered into his father's ear that night will remain a secret for years, a sentence so personal, so powerful, that it changed the emotional course of both their lives forever. Why did Michael choose that moment? What had happened between them in the hours before? And why did everyone in the room break down when they realized what that hug truly meant? The world never heard the full truth until now. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss our emotional stories about Michael Jackson. Los Angeles, late autumn of 2008. The hallway of the private medical center was unusually quiet. No paparazzi, no shouting fans, just a soft hum of fluorescent lights and the faint scent of antiseptic hanging in the air. Michael Jackson walked slowly beside his sister Rebby, his head slightly lowered, his hands tucked into the sleeves of his jacket, as if trying to shield himself from something deeper than the cold. Joseph Jackson lay inside that room. For Michael, the door felt heavier than any stage curtain he had ever stood behind. Joseph was more than a father. He was the architect of the Jackson 5, the disciplinarian, the commander, the man who built a legend and left scars that time never fully erased. Michael had not planned this visit. Earlier that day, a call came from his brother Jackie. Joseph's condition had worsened. Complications from years of diabetes and heart issues had taken another toll. The doctor's voice on the phone was calm, professional, but the message beneath it was unmistakable. If Michael wanted to see his father conscious again, he should come now. Michael hadn't answered immediately. He sat alone at the edge of his bed in the rented mansion he was staying in, staring at his hands. The same hands that once trembled under his father's strict commands, the same hands that now held the weight of a global legacy. His chest tightened with a storm of emotions he had buried for decades. Resentment, love, fear, confusion, gratitude. He whispered to himself, barely audible, "I don't know what to say to him anymore." Rebby's voice on the phone had been gentle. "Mike, he keeps asking for you." That sentence cracked something inside him. As the car stopped outside the hospital, Michael hesitated. The automatic door slid open, but his feet didn't move. The years of unspoken words pressed against his chest like invisible hands. What if he said the wrong thing? What if it was already too late? What if the boy he once was never got the chance to speak? When he finally stepped into the room, Joseph looked smaller than Michael remembered. Tubes, wires, the steady beep of a monitor. But when Joseph's eyes opened and found his youngest son, something in them softened. For a long moment, neither spoke. Michael felt 12 years old again. And in that silence, a realization hit him with crushing force. This might be the last conversation they would ever have. What Michael decided to do next, and the words he'd been holding inside for a lifetime, would change everything. And the hug that followed would carry more truth than either of them were ready to face. Michael closed the door behind him with the softest click, as if even the sound itself might shatter what little stability remained in that room. The air felt thick, heavy with things unsaid, memories layered over one another like invisible walls. Joseph's breathing was slow, uneven. The machines around him whispered and blinked, their rhythm strangely calm compared to the storm inside Michael's chest. For several seconds, Michael simply stood there. He wasn't sure how to approach the man who had once controlled every hour of his childhood, the man who had demanded perfection, disciplined greatness at any cost, the man who had stood in front of crowds and called him my boy with pride, and behind closed doors had terrified him with a look. Joseph turned his head slightly. "Michael, you came." His voice was weaker than Michael expected. The authority he once carried was still there, but it had softened, frayed at the edges by time and illness. Michael nodded, his lips pressed together. He walked closer, stopping at the foot of the bed. He could see every detail now. The lines on his father's face, the gray in his mustache, the hands that once clapped sharply in rehearsal, now trembling slightly on the sheets. "I heard you were asking for me," Michael finally said. Joseph exhaled. "I was..." Silence returned, heavier than before. Michael pulled a chair closer and sat down, his posture stiff, like a child waiting for instructions. For a moment, neither knew where to begin. The years between them, the tours, the fights, the lawsuits, the misunderstandings, the distance, all crowded the small space between the chair and the bed. Joseph spoke first. "I've been thinking a lot," he said, "about the old days, about you boys." Michael swallowed. "Yeah." Joseph's eyes shifted toward the window. "We were just trying to survive. I didn't know how to be anything else." The words weren't quite an apology. Not yet, but they were closer than Michael had ever heard him come. Michael looked at his hands again. He remembered those same hands gripping the microphone as a child, singing with a voice too big for his small body. He remembered the ache in his legs after rehearsals that lasted until dawn. He remembered wanting his father's approval more than anything. "I was scared all the time," Michael said quietly. Joseph's jaw tightened. "Scared of messing up. Scared of disappointing you. Scared of not being good enough." Joseph's fingers twitched on the blanket. He didn't look at Michael. "You were the best," he said. "That's not what it felt like," Michael replied. The room filled with attention, so dense it felt like glass about to crack. Joseph finally turned his head toward him, their eyes meeting fully for the first time. "I pushed you because I saw something in you," Joseph said. "Something that could change everything for this family." Michael shook his head slowly. "I know, but I was just a kid. I wanted you to see me, not just a performer." Joseph closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, they were wet. "I didn't know how," he admitted. That confession, fragile, broken, real, stunned Michael. He had waited his whole life for those words, and now that he had them, he didn't know how to hold them. "I didn't know how to be gentle," Joseph continued. "My father wasn't gentle. Nobody was gentle where I grew up. I thought strength was the only way." Michael's chest tightened. "But it hurt," he said. Joseph nodded once. "I know." The silence that followed was different. Softer, sadder, honest. Michael leaned back slightly, his mind flooding with memories. Riding buses from city to city, falling asleep on dressing room floors, the sound of his brothers laughing behind him while he practiced alone. He thought of the boy he had been, brilliant, gifted, lonely. "Sometimes I wonder who I would have been," Michael whispered, "if things were different." Joseph studied him carefully. "You became who you were meant to be." Michael's voice trembled. "I became famous. But I didn't always feel whole." Joseph reached out weakly, his hand hovering between them, unsure. After a moment, Michael took it. His father's hand felt smaller than he remembered. Fragile. Human. "I'm proud of you," Joseph said. "I always was." Michael closed his eyes. Those words landed with the weight of a lifetime. He felt something inside him break open, grief, relief, sorrow, love, all tangled together. They sat like that for a long time, father and son, holding hands in a way they never had before. No cameras, no audience, just two men confronting decades of silence. Eventually, Joseph's voice softened. "There's something I need to say before it's too late." Michael opened his eyes. "What is it?" Joseph inhaled, his chest rising slowly. "I'm sorry." The word hung in the air, fragile and sacred. Michael's breath caught. His eyes burned. For years he had imagined this moment, but now it was real, and it hurt more than he expected. "I'm sorry for fear, for the pressure, for the things I did wrong," Joseph said. "I can't change them, but I need you to know. I see it now." Michael squeezed his father's hand. He wanted to speak, but his voice refused to come. Instead, he stood up, moved closer, and leaned down. Without thinking, he wrapped his arms around his father. It was the first time in his life he had hugged him like that. Joseph's breath hitched. Michael held him there, his face near his father's ear, his heart pounding like a drum. Years of pain, love, confusion, longing, all of it surged through him in one overwhelming wave. And then Michael whispered something so private, so powerful, that no one else in the room could hear. Something that would change the meaning of everything that came before. Joseph's eyes widened. A tear slid down his cheek, and the monitor's steady beep seemed suddenly much louder. What Michael said in that moment would echo in Joseph's heart forever. Joseph's breath caught in his chest a moment. Michael whispered into his ear. His eyes, already heavy with exhaustion and regret, widened as if something ancient and deeply buried had suddenly been brought back to life. Whatever Michael had just said, it was not a sentence meant for the world. It was a message meant only for a father who carried both pride and guilt in equal measure for nearly a lifetime. Michael pulled back slowly, still holding his father's hand. His face was pale, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. He searched Joseph's expression, trying to understand whether his words had reached the place he intended. Joseph swallowed hard. For several long seconds, he couldn't speak. The machines continued their steady rhythm, but inside that small room, time seemed to stretch, waiting. What did you say?" Joseph finally whispered. Michael shook his head gently. "It's something I've carried in my heart since I was a boy. I didn't know how to say it until now." Joseph's lips trembled. "Say it again." Michael leaned closer. This time his voice was low but steady, each word wrapped in years of silence and longing. "I said, I forgive you, and I love you, even for the things that hurt." Joseph's face crumpled. The tears he had fought for decades finally escaped. They rolled down the lines of his face, slow and uncontrollable. The man who once commanded stages, rehearsals, and lives could no longer command his own emotions. "I didn't deserve that," Joseph whispered. Michael tightened his grip on his father's hand. "I didn't say it because you deserved it. I said it because I needed it." Those words seemed to strike Joseph even harder. For the first time in his life, Joseph looked at Michael not as a prodigy, not as a performer, not as a legacy, but as the child he had once been. "I was afraid," Joseph said quietly. "Afraid that if I wasn't hard on you, the world would be harder. I didn't know I was becoming the thing I was trying to protect you from." Michael listened, his chest aching. "I know," he said, "and I carry that fear with me everywhere, on every stage, in every hotel room. Even when I was surrounded by thousands of people, I felt alone." Joseph nodded slowly. "I see that now." Michael shifted closer to the bed, sitting on its edge. "There were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering why my own father couldn't just hold me and tell me I was enough." Joseph closed his eyes, a sob escaping his lips. "I'm so sorry, Michael." The weight of those words finally lifted something inside Michael. His shoulders relaxed. His breathing steadied. "I don't want to carry that pain anymore," Michael said. "I don't want my heart to be full of ghosts." Joseph opened his eyes. "You were always stronger than me." Michael smiled sadly. "I learned how to survive. That's not the same thing." They sat together in silence, the kind of silence that no longer felt empty, but full of things finally acknowledged. After a while, Joseph spoke again. "When the doctors told me I might not have much time, all I could think about was you, about whether you hated me, about whether I had broken you beyond repair." Michael shook his head. "You didn't break me. You shaped me. Some of it was painful. Some of it made me who I am. But I don't want the pain to be the last thing between us." Joseph's voice trembled. "I don't either." Michael reached up and gently wiped a tear from his father's cheek. "Then let's leave it here. Right now." Joseph exhaled, as if releasing decades of regret in one breath. "I'm proud of you, son," he said again. "Not because of the music, because of the man." Michael's eyes filled. "That means more than you know." They stayed like that for a long time, father and son connected in a way they never had before. Outside the window, the sky was turning gold, the sun slowly sinking behind the city. The light washed over the room, soft and forgiving. Michael stood up. "I should let you rest." Joseph nodded. "Will you come back?" Michael hesitated only for a moment. "Yes." He leaned down and hugged his father again, holding him gently, carefully, as if he were the one protecting him now. Joseph whispered, "I love you." Michael closed his eyes. "I love you, too." As Michael stepped toward the door, he felt something shift inside him. The boy who had spent his life trying to earn his father's love finally understood that the wound did not define him anymore. But the story was not finished. As he reached the door handle, a nurse appeared in the doorway. her expression tense. "Mr. Jackson," she said quietly, "we need to speak with you." Michael's heart skipped. "Is everything okay?" She hesitated. "Your father's condition is more serious than we thought. There are complications." Michael turned back toward the bed. Joseph was watching him, and in his eyes, Michael saw something that made his chest tighten. Not fear, but peace. Something was coming. Something final. The nurse's words echoed inside Michael's chest long after she finished speaking. Complications. That single word carried the weight of everything Michael had been trying not to think about. He stepped into the hallway with her, his hands trembling slightly as he ran them through his hair. "What kind of complications?" he asked. She lowered her voice. "His heart is weakening faster than expected. The doctors are doing everything they can, but we need you to be prepared." Prepared. Michael nodded, though he didn't feel prepared for anything. Not for this. Not for the idea that the man he had spent his entire life trying to understand might be slipping away just as they had finally found peace. He returned to the room slowly. Joseph's eyes followed him the moment he entered. "They said your heart's acting up," Michael said, trying to keep his voice calm. Joseph smiled faintly. "My heart's been acting up my whole life." Michael forced a small smile in return, but his chest tightened. He sat beside the bed again, taking Joseph's hand. The skin felt cooler now. "You should rest," Michael said. Joseph nodded, but he didn't close his eyes. "Stay with me a little longer." Michael leaned forward. "I'm not going anywhere." Minutes passed. The golden light outside faded into blue, then deepened into the indigo of early evening. The city beyond the window seemed distant, unreal. Inside the room, everything revolved around the soft rhythm of the machines and the steady rise and fall of Joseph's chest. Joseph finally spoke again. "Do you remember Gare, Indiana?" he asked. Michael nodded. "Every inch of it." Joseph smiled. "You used to sing in the living room with your brothers. You were so little. Your voice filled the whole house." Michael chuckled softly. "I used to be scared to mess up." "You never messed up," Joseph said. "Not once." Michael hesitated. "You know, I didn't really get a childhood." Joseph's jaw tightened. "I know. But I don't regret the music," Michael continued. "I just wish we had known how to be a family at the same time." Joseph squeezed his hand weakly. "So do I." A wave of emotion rose in Michael's chest. "It's strange. I spent so many years angry. But now, I just feel grateful we have this moment." Joseph looked at him carefully. "Me too." The door opened quietly. A doctor stepped inside with a clipboard, his expression grave but gentle. "Mr. Jackson," he said softly, "may I speak with you?" Michael stood. The doctor gestured toward the hallway. When the door closed behind them, the doctor took a breath. "We're losing him," he said. The words landed like a blow. "Is there anything else you can do?" Michael asked. "We're stabilizing him as much as possible," the doctor replied. "But his heart is very weak. I recommend you say what you need to say." Michael nodded slowly. "Thank you." He returned to the room, his steps heavy. Joseph was watching him. "They told you, didn't they?" Joseph said. Michael swallowed. "Yeah." Joseph smiled, strangely calm. "It's all right." Michael sat beside him, his voice breaking. "I'm not ready to lose you." Joseph lifted his hand, brushing Michael's arm. "You already gave me everything I needed today." Michael shook his head. "There's still so much I want to say." Joseph's eyes softened. "Then say it." Michael took a shaky breath. "I want you to know I'm at peace with what happened between us. I'm not carrying that pain anymore, and I hope you're not either." Joseph nodded. "I'm not." They held each other's gaze. The world outside the room seemed to fade completely. There was no fame, no history, no past, only two hearts facing the same truth. Michael leaned forward, resting his forehead gently against Joseph's. "Thank you," Michael whispered, "for the music, for the dreams, even for the lessons that hurt." Joseph's breath trembled. "Thank you for forgiving me." The machines beeped steadily. A nurse entered, checking the monitors. Her expression shifted slightly, concern deepening. Joseph's breathing became labored. Michael's grip tightened around his hand. "I'm here," Michael said. "I'm right here." Joseph's lips moved. "I know." A tear slid down Michael's cheek. "Dad." Joseph's eyes locked onto his son's. In them was something Michael had never seen before, pure, unguarded love. "I should have told you more," Joseph whispered, "but I always loved you." Michael nodded through tears. "I know." The nurse's voice was soft but urgent. "Michael," he shook his head. "Please, just a moment." Joseph's chest rose and fell unevenly. His grip on Michael's hand weakened. "I'm not afraid," Joseph said. Michael's voice cracked. "I am." Joseph smiled faintly. "You don't have to be." Seconds stretched. Then, with one final breath, Joseph's chest fell and did not rise again. The monitor's steady rhythm faltered, then became a single unbroken tone. The room fell silent. Michael froze. He stared at his father's face, waiting for another breath, another movement. It didn't come. The nurse gently placed her hand on Michael's shoulder. "I'm so sorry." Michael didn't move. He leaned down, resting his forehead against Joseph's, his body trembling with quiet sobs. "I love you," he whispered. He stayed there for a long time, holding his father's hand. The past finally laid to rest. Outside, night had fully fallen. But inside Michael's heart, something heavy had finally been released. And what he would do next would surprise everyone who thought they knew him. The days after Joseph Jackson's passing unfolded in a quiet haze. Michael did not speak to the press. He did not issue a statement. He did not allow the world inside the private grief that wrapped itself around him like a second skin. The man the world called the king of pop disappeared from the headlines, from the stage, from everything. Inside his rented mansion, the rooms felt impossibly large. The silence pressed against him. Every sound, the echo of his footsteps, the faint rustle of curtains, the distant hum of the city, seemed to remind him that something fundamental had shifted. Late one night, unable to sleep, Michael walked barefoot through the house. He stopped in front of a small wooden chest he hadn't opened in years. Inside were old photographs, handwritten lyrics, childhood mementos, and a single envelope addressed in Joseph's handwriting. Michael's breath caught. He sat on the floor and carefully opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. "To Michael, for the day I don't have the courage to say this out loud." Michael's hands trembled as he unfolded the letter. Joseph's handwriting was slow, uneven, written during a time when illness had already begun to claim his strength. "Son, I don't know how to speak about the things that matter most. I never learned how. I made you strong, but I know I also made you lonely. If I could go back, I would hold you more, listen more, protect you from myself. You carried the world on your shoulders when you were still a child. I am proud of the man you became. I am sorry for the pain I caused. I love you, always." Michael covered his mouth, the words blurring through tears. He sat there for hours, the letter pressed against his chest, finally understanding something he had needed his whole life. The man who hurt him had also loved him deeply, just without the tools to show it. In the weeks that followed, Michael did something no one expected. He began writing again. Not songs, letters. He wrote to his siblings, to his mother, to friends from his childhood, to collaborators who had stood by him when the world turned its back. He wrote about gratitude, about forgiveness, about how life was too fragile to leave anything unsaid. But one letter he never mailed. It was addressed simply, "Dad." In it, Michael poured everything he hadn't said in that hospital room. The fears, the dreams, the boy who just wanted to be held, the man who finally found peace. He sealed it and placed it back inside the chest. No one ever knew about it. Months later, Michael quietly visited a children's hospital in Los Angeles. No cameras, no press, just him and a small group of terminally ill children. He sang for them. He listened to their stories. He held their hands. One little boy asked him, "Why are you so nice to us?" Michael smiled sadly, because love should never wait. That night, alone in his room, Michael stared out the window and whispered, "Thank you, Dad." But even as he found peace, Another storm was forming on the horizon. The pressures of his career, his health, the weight of expectations. They were building again, unseen by the world. And the next chapter of his life would test the very promise he made in that hospital room. The promise that pain would no longer define him. The following year unfolded in ways Michael had never expected. The world, of course, never stopped watching him. But inside Michael, something had quietly shifted. The ache that lived in his chest since childhood. The constant tension, the feeling of running from an invisible shadow, had finally loosened its grip. He still carried the memories, but they no longer controlled him. In the mornings, he began taking long walks to the gardens, sometimes barefoot, letting the dew soak into his skin, breathing in the scent of jasmine and roses. He would pause, close his eyes, and remind himself of the promise he had made to his father. The pain will not define me anymore. At first, it felt fragile, like something that could shatter if he wasn't careful. But slowly it grew stronger. Michael started surrounding himself with people who made him feel safe again. Old friends from the early Motown days. Musicians who didn't see him as a brand, but as a soul. His mother, Catherine, who would sit with him for hours, holding his hand, praying quietly. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows, Catherine looked at him and said, "Your father loved you in the only way he knew how." Michael nodded. "I know. I finally know." He began returning to the studio, cautiously at first. Music had always been his refuge, but now it felt different, lighter, freer. For the first time in years, he wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. He was just creating. One afternoon, he recorded a song he never released. It wasn't meant for charts or awards. It was for himself. The lyrics spoke of forgiveness, of the child inside the man, of choosing love when bitterness would be easier. When he finished, the room was silent. The engineer wiped his eyes. Michael smiled softly. "That one's for me." But healing is never a straight line. Some nights, the old ghost returned. The boy in rehearsal rooms. The fear of disappointing. The echo of voices telling him he wasn't enough. When that happened, Michael would take out Joseph's letter and read it again. And every time, the words anchored him. Meanwhile, the world was demanding his return. Offers piled up, tours, interviews. A comeback bigger than anything he had ever done before. The pressure was enormous. The same world that once celebrated him now expected him to rise again. Michael felt the familiar weight on his shoulders. But this time, he refused to carry it alone. He told his team, "I will perform when I'm ready, not when the world wants me to." Some were shocked, others relieved. He began therapy. Real, honest therapy, something he had avoided for years. For the first time, he spoke openly about his childhood, about his father, about the cost of fame. And slowly, the wound continued to close. In the spring, Michael returned to the hospital where Joseph had passed. He didn't go inside. He sat in the car for a long time, staring at the building. Then he whispered, "I kept my promise." That night, he dreamed of himself as a little boy, standing on a stage, singing under bright lights. But this time, when he looked into the audience, his father was smiling, not demanding, not judging, simply proud. When he woke, his pillow was wet with tears. As the year went on, Michael finally agreed to begin preparing for what would become his final great project. The rehearsals were intense. The expectations were overwhelming. But something inside him remained steady. When exhaustion hit, he didn't push through it blindly. He rested. When fear crept in, he didn't bury it. He spoke about it. When loneliness whispered, he didn't run from it. He invited people in. One evening after rehearsal, he sat alone on the stage, the empty seats stretching into darkness. He whispered, "I'm still here." And for the first time, he truly believed it. Yet even as he grew stronger, his body began to betray him. Fatigue lingered longer. Pain crept in more often. Sleep became elusive. The stress of returning to the spotlight stirred the old battles he thought he had conquered. One night, alone in his room, he pressed his hand against his chest, breathing slowly, reminding himself of the promise. "I will not let pain define me." But the road ahead was about to demand everything he had. And Michael would soon face the hardest test of that promise. Because some wounds don't reopen, they reveal how much strength it took to close them. The final rehearsal hall was almost empty. Only a few soft lights illuminated the vast stage. The echoes of music from earlier still lingered in the air like ghosts of something sacred. Michael stood alone at center stage, breathing slowly, listening to his own heartbeat. He was tired, not just physically, but in the deep, soul-level way that comes from a lifetime of carrying too much. He thought about the hospital room, the final hug, the words he whispered, the promise he made. I will not let pain define me. The months of preparation, the pressure, the weight of expectation, all of it had tested that promise again and again. But Michael had kept it. He had chosen love over bitterness, forgiveness over anger, peace over fear. He sat on the edge of the stage and looked out into the empty seats. "This is for you, Dad," he whispered. When rehearsals ended that night, Michael returned home quietly. He walked through the rooms of his house, touching the piano, the framed photographs, the small chest that held the letters. He opened it one last time and read Joseph's words again. Then he placed his own letter beside it. "I kept my promise," he said softly. That night, Michael slept more peacefully than he had in years. In the days that followed, those close to him noticed something different. A calm, a gentleness, a sense of closure. He smiled more. He laughed. He hugged people longer. He told them he loved them without hesitation. One of his dancers later said, he wasn't chasing anything anymore. He had already found it. Michael knew his body was tired. He knew the road ahead was uncertain. But his heart was no longer afraid, because he had finally made peace with the past. And peace changes everything. When the end came, it did not come with fear. It came with the quiet strength of a man who had healed the deepest wound of his life. Those who truly knew and believed that when Michael closed his eyes for the last time, he was not haunted by childhood, by fame, or by regret. He was holding the memory of that final hug, the forgiveness, the love, the promise. And that promise outlived him. Because every time someone hears his music and feels understood, every time a broken heart finds comfort in his voice, every time someone chooses love instead of pain because of him, Michael Jackson is still keeping it. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who loves Michael Jackson. And always remember, if this story inspired you, remember, even legends face battles unknown to the world. Subscribe, leave a like, and share this video with someone who loves Michael Jackson.